Sunday. Welcome to another broadcast, another episode of True Story Live. I'm one of your hosts on the panel, Jason Cripps, and welcome to True Story Live. We appreciate everyone that's here and everyone that they're probably getting the notifications now and they'll be coming into the chat room. And for tonight's topic, we have a wonderful show for you tonight, and the title is Never Tear Us Apart, Two Worlds Collided. And we'll get into more of that in just a little bit. And between now and that time, if you're listening to this on the playback and you want to kind of skip all the frivolities and the pleasantries at the beginning and just get right into the meat of the program, then you can skip forward to the 10-minute mark, and that's when we'll actually get things going right around there. All right, Never Tear Us Apart, Two Worlds Collide, and we'll tell you more about that in just a few minutes. Meanwhile, I would like to say hello to the members of the panel, and we'll start from my left on my screen with Glenn from Australia. Glenn, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
That's a lower register of voice for you, Glenn. That's good.
Yes,
I love
that's
it.
how we're going to do the reading.
Love it.
Yeah. We have a special treat for you tonight because this particular topic, written from Glenn's perspective, it made a little bit more sense to have him do it. So this will be the first time anyone else has done the, I think, isn't it? Jenn, is this the first time anyone else has done the reading for it? Okay. So this will be fun. And Glenn is certainly up to the task. It'll be delightful. Thanks for being here, Glenn, and thank you as usual for doing the write-up and coming up with the questions for the panel to answer. Appreciate
Pleasure.
that. And the illustrious, the wonderful, the amazing-minded, and also the gosh, what do you call that thing? I can't remember the ukulele playing.
I was gonna say girlfriend.
Yeah, that's out of the bag now. I guess we can call it that. That's good. Okay.
Help you out there, buddy.
Ukulele playing, Jenn. How are you tonight, Jenn?
I'm doing great. I had a great day today. Every day is great, but every day is great to be alive.
It is great to be alive.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're so happy that you're here again. And you're kind of the subject of this topic tonight as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're in the spotlight. When Glenn was preparing for the show, we after he was asking me he asked me questions first, and at the end, I was like, "Oh, I gotta wipe the sweat off my forehead." I feel like I've sitting in an interrogation room with a huge lamp pointed directly at my face, and they won't let me have anything to drink or a cigarette. That's exactly what I said. I don't smoke anymore, but there it is. Thanks for being here, Jenn.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. And also just popped in Esteban from the channel Melted Zone. Esteban, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, my friend. So tell us a little bit about your channel. We were going to do something this weekend, but I didn't hear from you. So I didn't know if you decided not to do it or what the deal was. But tell people about your channel and where they can find it.
Hello, Melted Zone. Esteban here. And my channel, we talk about the gospel, we play video games, and we have just straight up discussions about anything. And sorry, Brother Cripps, I was trying to get a hold of you, but I was trying to find your email.
Oh.
And for some reason I couldn't find it.
Okay.
And, so I'll definitely, I just found it right now, so I'll definitely send you the link.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's it. You know, I'm there for you. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But yeah, definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to come on with you. No problem. All right. Also, we have Talking Doctrine. Matthias is with us tonight. Say hello to the people, Matthias.
Hello, people. I hope everybody's doing well out there in internet land. Glad to be here.
That was good. I like what you did with it. That's good. Matthias' channel, Talking Doctrine. I'm sure everyone of you has heard that. So if you hadn't had a chance, if you're listening to playback, go over to Talking Doctrine if you want to. Well, he talks about doctrine. So there you go. If you have any interest in that, there are lots of subjects to look at. He likes to bring people and have pretty much anyone that wants to have a discussion. If they have a different doctrine, or they maybe don't agree with the doctrine that's being preached on the channel, then they can come in and they sit down and have a dialogue about it. And Matthias is very pleasant, really easy to talk to, and he gives people the chance to say their piece, and it's not antagonistic or anything. So, yeah, go over and listen to Talking Doctrine. That'd be great. All right, so we're missing a panel member tonight, Steve. He is home this week. He's a truck driver. He's on the road all the time. And I respect this very much. I've said this before, but when he's at home, he likes to try to make sure and kind of unplug from all the shows and things like that. So that's where he is tonight. So we won't have Steve with us this week. But we have a wonderful panel, and we have a great topic, which we'll start in just a few minutes. And Jen, say hello to the people in the chat.
Hello, people in the chat. Frank B loves Jesus, so I'm going to throw that out there since he's usually asking us to give him a shout out.
No problem.
I'm going to beat you to it. Mike W. Every time I look at this word, my eyes cross.
Kahuna.
I'm just not going to get it.
Yeah.
Mr. Peanut Head.
Let me talk about that
Monocle
before
Man.
you move on. Yeah, Monocle Man. That's what I like.
Yeah.
Peanut Head or Monocle Man.
Yep.
Go over to his channel as well, especially from last night. He had a special broadcast with a special guest on there. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, it's pretty awesome.
Sweet.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
And Sarah Jane, BB Truth. Who else is here?
BB Truth.
BB Truth. Somebody said hey at the beginning, but I don't think they're on anymore. There's too much talking going on. Again, it's taking too long to scroll to the top. Okay, that's all I've got so far, unless you see somebody else that I need to say hey to.
No, that's okay. Just all right. So we're almost to the 10-minute mark, and usually the 10-minute mark works pretty perfectly when we have everyone on the panel, but we're not gonna put it off anymore. We'll go ahead and start, and I'm gonna turn it over to Glenn. Glenn's gonna do the write-up for tonight, and then we'll get started. So I'm passing it over to you, Glenn. It's all yours.
Yeah, thanks.
You sound so excited, Glenn.
Oh, I can hardly contain myself.
Brimming over.
It won't be with the finesse of the Crippeth, but we'll give it a shot.
The Crippeth.
That's awesome. That's a new one.
Never tear us apart. Two worlds collided. Great news from Ms. Jenn and Mr. Jason last week. You all heard it if you were here. And it looks like it's plastered on Facebook as well, because they each like the song INXS has been chosen to ring in this week's adventure. Availability. It's up there, the lyrics, etc. The link's there for YouTube. We start with the quotes. God does not ask your ability or your inability. He asks only your availability. Mary Kay Ash. From what I can see, the issues facing believers when it comes to moving on in life after divorce, separation, abandonment, etc., are as complex as they might be simple. It seems a lot easier for an atheist. To be honest, yes, it does seem a lot easier to me. Availability for tonight's show is about the emotional and spiritual processes that play a part in any decision to be open to any new relationship, whether it be a friend, a partner, etc. So the first question is, what does availability mean to you? Next, is your availability towards another person different than it is to God? Doesn't sound quite right. Do you believe worlds collide as part of God's plan? Do you believe people come together randomly, fortuitously, or predestined? In life's equation, where does your sphere of influence begin and end? The worlds of Ms. Jenn and Mr. Jason did indeed collide. We'll be asking them, how did you recognise you were, in fact, available to each other? Sounds like a good time also for others to contribute their stories. I'm sure we all have experiences of when we're both available and unavailable. Yeah, please feel free. We've again entered the world of love together with the thought that believers are only accountable to one source, and that's no person. Paulo Coelho, who is, of course, my favourite, says anyone who loves in expectation of being loved in return is wasting their time. As the quote implies, availability is giving 100% of what one has to give unconditionally. No half measures, no expectations. What part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes? What part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision? What part does God play in your relationship availability decision? Okay, they're available. Now what? Maybe it's as simple as having the confidence and belief in ourselves. If you trust yourself, the path will unfold and there'll be nothing you can do about it. That's when collisions happen. Mr. Jason and Ms. Jenn, please come forth and inspire us again. I hope you can do that. We might be getting desperate by that time. I remember a conversation with Mr. Jason about 2 years ago. It was just after his mum died, actually, in which it was said, I said to him, you can't imagine how you'll feel about any of this until you experience it. Sounds like the thoughts about another experience we hear said often. Anyway, some people around us will not understand our journey. They don't need to. It's not for them. So next time you become concerned about how people judge or see you, send that thought on a boomerang that does not come back, and a lot of them are not meant to come back. You don't choose who you fall in love with, but you can choose whether or not you're brave enough to start a new chapter of your life with them. That one's unquoted and is the finish of this evening's write-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
Wow.
Wonderfully done. I know, clapping.
Bravo. Bravo. Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that, and appreciate the write-up. And so we're kind of in the hot seat a little bit for tonight's show, because it does have to do with the relationship that was announced by Jenn last week, to my surprise. Did not know that was going to happen. So, yeah, I was very, very pleasantly surprised. And I'm ready to talk about it. First thing I'll say that it's been incredibly difficult for the past, a little over 6 months now, to not say much about it. And but on my end, I couldn't force anything because I was not. I was free on my end either way to be able to either share it with people or not share it with people. And the decisions to not share it with people, we knew that there would be, regardless of how we did it and whether people knew the whole story or not, that we would get some comments from people that were hateful and negative. But fortunately, at least where it is concerned with social media, out of like 86 comments or maybe more than that now, but last I checked, like 86 comments from friends and family and people that know us. We had one comment where someone felt like they needed to set us straight and make sure that we knew that, how would you classify that, Jenn? Make sure that we knew that we were
Adulterers.
Adulterers, yeah. Adulterers, yeah.
Yeah.
So then the decision tends to be, do you erase the person and block them and all that? And after talking to Jenn about it, I was making the point that people have a right to their opinion. They have a right to share whatever they like. And frankly, to me, when they come out with that kind of hateful use of scripture and trying to use it in a way in order to shame people, their comments are self-damning. They put themselves open and for everyone else to get an opportunity to see the way that they're looking at things. And even not even following, if they want to follow the Bible and try to imply in some way that we're not following, this particular gentleman just came out and said that we're not following Christ if we're doing A, B, C, and D. And I would just point out, and this we're not naming the guy made the comment. But if he's following the Bible and if he's following Christ, the correct thing would have been done. The correct thing to do would have been to contact me privately first, and share his, if he feels like I should be admonished in some way, then he should have done it privately. But instead of doing that, he put it on Facebook for everyone to see. So this is just, to me, it's just an example of the way that some people choose to do things. And even though criticizing out of one side of his mouth, and then he ends up doing something that goes directly against the process of the way things should be done. But tonight's not about negativity. It's not about talking or focusing in on the negative aspects of people looking at it from the outside. Just wanted to mention that we knew going forward that regardless of how we did it, and even without people knowing the whole story, that there would be some people that would not understand and that would try to paint it in a negative light. So we were prepared for that. But instead, what we got mostly is love and support from most people, and that's extremely meaningful. And we appreciate all of the comments that were made. So thank you. All right, so let's get started. The first question that was read, and Glenn was even kind enough to put on there, first question.
Thanks, Glenn.
Makes it easy for me to find. What does availability mean to you? What does availability mean to you? And I'll start on the right-hand side with Matthias. Matthias, what does availability mean to you, sir?
Well, I would say, and I think in context of how it was asked, I would say somebody who's single.
Okay.
Somebody who doesn't have a significant other and is looking to, have a union with, I would say, the opposite sex.
Okay.
But then I would also say, in another context, say I am unavailable in one way and absolutely available in the other. As in, I only have eyes for my wife when it comes to women in companionship.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to the work of the Lord, I'm willing, send me.
Yeah.
So I'm available to do the work of God. And actually, I'm even more available with the fact that I'm unavailable, because the support I have from my one flesh,
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it. So,
amen. And I'm sure Paula would agree to that, what you just said.
I'm sure she would.
Yeah. So you guys work together quite a bit, and if there's anyone listening that didn't get a chance to hear the testimony from Paula that we did this past week, it's on the channel, so you can go back and listen to that. Definitely worth it. It was wonderful. Okay, thanks, Matthias, and we'll go to Esteban. Esteban, what does availability mean to you, sir?
Availability means to be there for somebody when they're in their ups and their downs.
Hey, Esteban, there's some noise in the background or something. Can you either speak louder or put it up closer to your face?
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Good? Yep.
Okay,
good to
go. What I was trying to say is it's being there for somebody, whether it's a friend or your significant other. You're there to be there with them and help them through hard times, good times, all times. I mean, God teaches us that in the scriptures too, so that he's always there with us. So it's a great example right there, guys.
There you go. Perfect. Thanks, Esteban. Appreciate that. Jen, you're up next. You can take the first crack at it before I go.
Okay. I liked both of those answers, actually. I think about availability and relationship, like an intimate relationship with a spouse or boyfriend being open.
Yeah.
Being open and authentic.
Yes.
And actually, that goes for friendships though too. It's a little bit different, obviously,
Yeah.
but it's just being open and authentic and available to be open and authentic, not just in what you share with them, but what they share with you. Available to listen as well as to share.
Yeah.
So that's my answer.
Perfect. Thank you. So that ties into my understanding of availability, and this really comes from something that I understood a long time ago about people being available. And yes, it's mainly in relationships, but you know, it can be like a personal thing for a lot of different folks. For me, I used to imagine I would see people out somewhere, and I would try to imagine if that person was available, whether it be for friendship or a romantic relationship or whatever. Just from the more general side of someone being available. I like that Matthias kind of split it up. He's not available for a romantic relationship, but he's available to do the work of God, which is really, really good way to say that. And that's true for us as well. Are we available to do work for God? Are we available for a relationship with God at all? Or is our sign, the sign that we have above our heads, the metaphorical invisible sign, does it say closed? And I've referred to this on other shows, but there was a period of time, especially after my divorce and healing from that, and God working in and through me in dealing with that and teaching me lots of new lessons that I wouldn't have learned had I not had to go through that horrible thing, where my sign clearly would have said closed, not open like it is now, would have been closed. And I was there for a while. And we'll get into more of that particular story later as the questions automatically lead to more information coming out about that. But for me, availability is either a person is closed or open, or there's variables in between of being open to certain things or to certain people being closed to others. So to me, it's just the quality or the standard of a person and whether they're open to relationship or not. That's what it means to me. But great answers so far. Okay, and we'll just check. And oh, by the way, I didn't say this at the beginning, but if any of you in the chat want to answer a question yourselves and want us to see it, we would love it. We want you guys to be as involved as you want to be in the chat. So either put it in caps or address it to a member on the panel and highlight it, and we'll be able to see it, and we'll read it out after everyone on the panel has had an opportunity to answer the questions. Then we will scan the chat and see.
I was actually going to say there's a few people that did answer.
Perfect. Go ahead.
BB Truth said being humble.
Oh, great.
That's a good point. Like, does being humble, is that a prerequisite of being available? One of them, you know, I'm sure there's many, but that's a good point.
That is a good point.
And Mike answered, where is it? No. Can you see it? Where, Mike? Okay, he said, I kind of look at availability more like what Esteban says, like if they are not there for you, they need to hit the road.
Yeah. Yeah, if someone is not available for you, if their sign reads closed, but they're giving off mixed signals, for instance, they're saying they're open, but it becomes quickly apparent to you that they're not, then Mike at least is saying that we don't need to waste a lot of time with that, for sure. I hear you, Mike. Great point. Is that it, Jen?
Yeah, that's it so far. Perfect.
Okay, so the second question is, or Glenn phrased it next.
Wait. There was a really good point Golgotha said. He said, like Paula said in her testimony when she pulled out the Bible in the hotel room and said to God, I'm not ready for this at the moment. And he said in caps, not available.
Oh, Golgotha. Thanks, buddy. Yes, exactly right. Yes. So Paula was saying to God, given the opportunity, she was saying at that time, she was saying that her sign read closed to God. Not available. Not available.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow, that doesn't just
knock it between the eyes.
Yep, knocked it between the eyes, laid it right down, and knocked over all 10 pins, whatever way you want to use. Whatever sports analogy you choose to use for that one. Thanks, Gotha. That was good and perfect timing. Thanks, Jenn.
Yeah.
Okay, next. Is your availability towards another person different than it is to God? Is your availability towards another person different than it is to God? And Matthias, I know you already touched on this a little bit, but if you could expound on a little bit from your answer formed toward this question and explain that from your perspective a little bit, that would be helpful.
All right. Yeah. Well, let's see. Where's the next? First, and then, where's it? Oh, next. That's it.
Yep.
Availability towards another person different than it is to God. Yes and no again.
Okay, that's all right.
Well, because my availability to my wife to be leader, provider, supporter, is my availability to her in that fashion, to love her in the way that I do, is actually what God tells me to do.
Absolutely.
So it's not different than God. It's actually obeying God in a way, but it's like obeying in a way that, yay, I love it. It's awesome.
Thank you, Matthias.
So, my availability towards another person is also that if anybody is in need of to hear the gospel, I drop whatever it is that's on my plate that's important or nothing supersedes God, the work I have for God.
Right.
And so my availability to other people to be there for them, to preach and to edify and exhort, even rebuke, comes from thus saith the Lord. So it is me being available to God as I'm available to others.
Amen. So this follow-up question isn't part of the questions, but I'm curious to know your take on this. So you mentioned very well talking about Paula and that idea of the way that you treat Paula because God told you to treat her that way. And you've also made it very clear that when it comes to the gospel, if someone needs to hear that, then that takes precedence over other things. So if it comes down to it being a decision of whether to do something that would generally be considered for God, and you're needed by Paula for some reason, then how do you balance that equation?
My first ministry is my family.
Yes.
That's the first ministry that God has given you. And I do have to admit, sometimes I do put ministry for other people and even online, but other people, like I'll put aside ministering and spending time with my family because I look at it as being like a joyful thing, rather than or a happiness thing, rather than going to go in the trenches and preach the word. But I've had to make sure I remember that being in the trenches with your family sometimes is where God wants you and needs you anyways. So the first ministry for all of us, first and foremost, should be our wives or our spouses, and then our children.
If you were here in person, I would give you a brotherly kiss.
Wait a minute there.
I've had discussions about this particular topic, and I'm not trying to derail the conversation, but I think it's so important to talk about it while it's out there. I've heard from people in the ministry before, and I've heard stories of broken marriages, even Christian ones, that didn't need to happen because the person that was a pastor or a minister or an evangelist or whatever, they looked at it, and sometimes you hear it in literature from what you would consider, or at least most people would consider, great, generals of the army of God that went out there and wrote books and traveled and evangelized all over the place. Even so much so that Hudson Taylor, I believe, is that right? I heard an excerpt from a letter to his wife and talking about how he loves her and everything, but it was his great joy to put her second, as God was first. And then so the way that you're talking about it is, first of all, that it's both. If you're serving God, God tells you to put your wife first, so the wife comes first before the ministry. There's a lot of people in the ministry that don't look at it that same way, to the detriment of and destruction of their marriage and relationships. I think you can learn how to balance the two. And I appreciate your honesty, Matthias, in saying that sometimes, it might be a little more toward the ministry in certain circumstances. But the other thing is, too, you mentioned one flesh. So if Paul is on the same page with you, when you when you make a choice to put the ministry first in a certain situation, I'm sure there's understanding and grace from her in that area. I mean, I'm assuming, but I think if you're one flesh with person and you're close and you're connected with the person, if they're cool with you putting that first in certain scenarios, then it's all good. But to just say, I'm going to put ministry first and my wife second, I don't believe Scripture lines up with that. So great answer, Matthias. Thank you so much. Okay. Esteban, my friend, is your availability towards another person different than it is to God?
Well, can you guys hear me? I want to make sure that first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making sure, Esteban. Yes.
Okay, just making sure. I would have to say that, man, it's a tough one. I mean, like Matthias, we do have things in this life. I'm not saying there's certain commitments we have in this life with our family.
Mm-hmm.
And God has us in certain situations, I would say, too. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's a balance. Like you guys said, it's a balance of knowing the limitations and praying about it to God first, always asking God for guidance, because we don't lean on our own understanding.
Yeah, we shouldn't be.
Yeah. So I would say that depending on what God has told you in the scriptures and all that, because that's how we understand it, mm-hmm. And for us to be still with Him, I would say that it's different. I mean, if we're to consider our life, really think about it, like, that's, I don't know how to say this. I'm trying to, like, I'm boggled.
Okay, that's all right. So what it sounds like you're saying is it's different for you between God and other people. Is that right? Is that what you're?
Well, with God, I would have to say, because He gave up. He did all that. He humbled Himself, came as man, and died for us. I'm in awe. Like, yes. It makes me feel like, yes, I want to be there for everyone, and I want to do all those things. But if God tells me, hey, I have a different plan for you,
yeah,
then I listen to what he says. I don't let anybody get in the way of that. And that's just how I see it. But, like I said too, everybody, he has people in your life for a reason.
Yeah.
So if it's ministry work, to help others with that, to help them in situations that they're in, to give them hope, then yes, be there for them.
Yeah.
And that's what God wants,
Okay.
So that's just what I see.
Thank you so much, Esteban. It just occurred to me that usually I ask Glenn at the end of each question if he has a comment to make, and please forgive me, I didn't do that with the first question. So, Jen, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to Glenn, and you can answer both the first question and then the next. Share your thoughts on those two things.
Can I say one more thing real quick? I just forgot. We're also supposed to show the love of God through us. He's showing his love through us.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there's that too, to help others, and that's showing love.
Okay. Thanks, Esteban. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Glenn. Answer the first question first if you have any thoughts on that, and then the second one too, please.
Sure. Okay. The first question, well, my answer was slightly off to the side. Availability to me meant that I was open to let people throw anything they like at me and not be in the defensive zone.
Oh.
Explain that more.
Yeah. Not have a mindset of being on the defensive. Being that to me means I'm available to let people say and do what they want, and just be not reactive to it. Yourself, once you've got your back up, you're not really listening to what anyone says to you because you're too focused on yourself.
Oh, sure.
And your own hurt.
Sure.
So I'd say it's related to being on the defensive in that sense. Question two. Well, I can't really answer towards the God part, but I would not think it's. I would think availability is availability regardless.
Uh-huh.
If you're 100% available, you can't be 101%.
Right.
So I'd be thinking it's the same.
Okay.
Just a thought, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, that's what we want. Your thoughts. Absolutely. Jen?
Okay. Yeah, this was a little bit of a mind boggler, but I wrote some notes down while we're talking. I hope this makes sense. Okay, so I said God prompts our hearts for his spirit in us to be available to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is always, doesn't mean it always pans out that way. Sometimes we miss an opportunity. But always being open to be available to love and pray for others. But within our availability to God, it's a different kind of open. And I mean that in the sense that because he knows us fully, the kind of availability we have with him is so much more than our full availability with others.
Wow.
And because we're yielded to God, it's different because we're not yielded to people.
That is true.
It's a priority. It's more of a priority to be available to God, but it works together. So the first thing I mentioned about being available in the sense that letting God work through us, it does play out in our relationships when we meet strangers or when we're dealing with family or friends in situations. So it's symbiotic.
I love it.
Hope that made sense.
It did make sense, at least
Wonderful.
to me. That's
awesome.
all.
No.
No. Where's Mark when you need him?
I know, right?
Okay. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. I would very much agree with what everyone has said. All of you on the panel touched on elements of this, which I would completely agree. For me, if you start out with the idea of being available to God and your relationship with him, if you're connected to him, you're abiding in him, you're have open lines of communication and all of that, it then makes it easier for you to be available for other people as well. And Jen, I loved what you said about that we're yielded to God, where we're not necessarily yielded to other people. I do think it's different in a marriage, and you're not saying it isn't different. I'm just adding to it more to what Matthias was saying. But that in a one flesh situation where you're married to the person under God, that relationship, you should be available to your spouse, completely available and connected in the same way that our relationship with God is a model of what marriage should be, in my opinion. And being willing for the guy, being willing to love his wife like Christ loved the church and be willing to lay down his life for her. I would say that if you're willing to lay down your life for your wife, then you're pretty available to her. And that's important. It's important to me to do it that way. So for me, if I'm available to God and I'm available to be used by him in whatever way possible, then in some ways that can also make me available, make it easier for me to be available for people. Okay. All right. Do we have any answers from the chat before we move to the third question? I didn't see any.
I didn't see any either.
Okay, no problem. All right, question 3. Now, I did ask everyone. Yeah, I think I did. Good. Do you believe worlds collide as part of God's plan? Do you believe people come together randomly, fortuitously, or predestined? Well, you got a good one to start with there, Matthias, so I'll read it again. Do you believe worlds collide as part of God's plan? Do you believe people come together randomly, fortuitously, or predestined?
All right, excuse my ignorance. What is fortuitously? How would you define that?
I would define it as by fortune, like by the fortunately you ran into someone that you collided with and you liked it instead of it being a calamity. But Glenn, how would you define fortuitously? Glenn?
I looked yeah, on my okay. I don't have a mouse on my laptop. That's why I'm late.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much like you said, almost as like I would answer the question. I'd say that you attract people in a similar place that you are. So fortuitously, say you are in a place of requiring something, someone who came into your life fortuitously would bring answers with them and assistance with them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. I love that.
Yeah, that sort of thing. It's not quite predestined, but it's not random either.
Okay. It's like in between the
coming in the moment when they're required.
Okay. By fortune. Yep.
Okay. All right. I think I can go with that and
excellent.
Understand that. Yeah, worlds collide as as parts of God's plan for sure. Whether you realize it or not, free will is completely intact. But at the same time, God's the one that's providing every opportunity that you get to choose from.
Right.
So, you know, God can bring worlds to collide, but if the free will isn't used in the sense of getting to know one another or just even responding to, you know, the situation, then it doesn't really matter. You know, God's plan isn't forced ever.
No.
So a husband and wife could cross paths, and God predestined, in a sense, them because He knew their future. But I think that had they been living for Him, they may have found each other sooner in life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So, I think that everyone who was created in the first 6 days, and that God created through His omniscience. So, while the worlds colliding wasn't forced, it was foreknown. But those worlds that collided that were foreknown were going to happen. So there's God's omniscience comes into play here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not random or predestined. I think fortuitously actually fits it quite nicely.
Perfect. Wow. I love your answer, Matthias. You're on fire tonight, in my opinion. Appreciate it. Esteban, you get the next crack at it, my friend. Matthias, do you have something else you want to add?
I was just going.
Yeah, because you're so hot. Yeah, I love it. Esteban.
I would have to say the spiritual realm mimic. We mimic the spiritual realm. The spiritual realm's the real realm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already been foreknown because it's the spiritual realm. So things that happen in the spiritual realm, things that happen in the physical realm, has already probably happened in the spiritual realm. So, so it's all interconnected into one.
Okay.
So that's just what I think.
No, perfect.
And with me and my fiance, I would have to say, yeah. I mean, God already knew before it even happened. Funny story, if I could just say it real quick.
Sure, you can.
I gave her a potato wedge, and we were both working at the same spot at Walmart, and that's how we met. We were on break at the same time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You were both Walmart employees?
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
Okay.
And I said I wasn't hungry anymore, and I gave her a potato wedge, and she thought it was cute, and we just started hitting off after that.
Nice. Met because of a potato wedge. I love it. Thanks, Esteban. Appreciate that. Jen, you're up.
I'm still listening. Do you mind coming back to me?
No, I can come back to you. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
For me, yes, absolutely. I agreed with both of those answers. For me, definitely fortuitously, definitely predestined, not at all random. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this was God's doing and not my own. When Jenn came along, we were just friends. We knew each other for a year before there were any feelings discussed or anything. And of course, she was in a marriage, had no desire to get into a situation where I was coveting. It wasn't on my radar. Wasn't thinking about it in that way at all, because of the fact that she was not available, in the strictest of terms, not available. So on my end, and I will be happy to get more into this as the questions continue. On my end, I was long out of a divorce, but I wasn't in a place of putting myself back out there. And so I was still not available at the beginning, certainly at the beginning of our friendship. So it just wasn't anything I was trying to make happen. It wasn't planned on my part or anything like that. It literally was something that happened outside of me. And then I will say, I agree with what Matthias said earlier about free will. Free will is definitely a factor that even if God were to make two worlds collide, in this case, it would be Jen's world and my world. Either of us would have the free will choice to either accept that or to run away from it. And in my case, I would not run away from anything that was so clearly not random, not a circumstance, not an accident, not a happy surprise, but fortuitously and predestined, simply by my view of the way that God does things and chooses to do things. And I just wanted to comment briefly. When Matthias was talking, he mentioned that in talking about it being predestined, that if two people were living for the Lord, they may have met sooner. And Jen and I have actually talked about that. Not that we weren't necessarily living for the Lord, but both of us made other decisions that who knows? We'll never know for sure if both of us had been single a long time ago, if God would have made our worlds collide earlier. But it is definitely something that we've talked about. I don't know. All I know is that this particular time, it was not random. Well, I've already said that, so I won't go back over it. But it was definitely a worlds colliding situation for sure. Okay, Jen, are you ready, or I can ask Glenn?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, yeah, I think people's worlds colliding, whether it's relationships or friendships, I think it is part of God's plan. I actually have had a lot of experience in the last few weeks with people coming in the store that I have. It's some of it is customers that I've known for years, and some of the people are new people that just randomly come in the store, and we get into these conversations and share and connect.
Mhm.
And it's so obvious that God's hand is on it.
Yeah.
Just the things that we talk about and the emotions and the connecting. And it's wonderful. And I don't think anything's random. I really don't. I think God is too big of a God. Yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn, do you have a comment you'd like to make about this particular question?
Yeah, I can't go with the God one. So
Okay.
obviously that's not relevant to me, but in terms of the three words, I think all of the above. I think I know this is way different from the rest of you, but I think at a higher level of the universe works randomly. But I think as we narrow it down into life, I think it becomes fortuitous, and I'm probably more stuck towards that with Matthias. That middle word is, like I said, it's when people tend to show up and you tend to show up for them just at the appropriate moment, as long as you're open to it and you're available. I don't think fortuitous works if you're not available.
Right.
I
No.
think it just,
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead, Glenn.
You got excited.
Yeah. Actually, that sounded pretty good even to me. Predestined. Yeah, sometimes it just feels like it was all just sitting out there waiting and for the right moment, and it's going to drop on you when you least expect it.
Right.
So I think elements of the three all come together in whatever way they come together.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but I'm happy to accept it.
Yeah. Well, let me throw another question in there, Glenn. In regards to having met my mother, how do you fit that into the three questions? Was it random? Was it fortuitously? Or was it predestined, or a mixture of any of those?
No, I have to say it was not random.
Right.
Absolutely not. I'd say, oh, look, where do you get experiences like that in the rest of your life? No, I'd have to say a combination of the other two. There definitely felt like a predestined part to that as well. I mean, even as an atheist, it still felt predestined in many respects.
Yeah. And so this is the next question isn't obviously you're aware of the next question that I'm going to ask you then. So for an atheist person that doesn't believe in a God, I mean, you have kind of said that you do believe as far as there being a universe of some sort. But either way, whether it's God or the universe, how is that available if there's nothing? How is predestination even possible if there's nothing greater than ourselves as a moving force of any kind? It seems like everything would only be able to be random.
Look, I don't know.
Okay.
it doesn't feel like God, but it does feel, if I want to put a very cliched label on it, cosmic connectedness or some sort of other level of connection that we're not aware of in our daily lives. But I think there's definitely something. I mean, I would not just sit here as an atheist and say there's nothing beyond what the believers perceive an atheist to be. I think there's way more than that. It's just that I don't know what it is. I don't understand it, but I feel it.
Well, that's fair. That's a fair answer. Yeah, just but there are some atheists, and I'm not putting you in that same category, as you've heard me say many times, that the way I felt about atheists in general, you've changed my opinion very much so. At least I can't put you in the same category as everyone else. And of course, I should have known that, because I used to be angry about everyone throwing me into the same Christian pile. And they're looking at the ones out there that get the most attention, the ones that stand out there at a funeral of a soldier and have the, God hates so and so, like they represent all of us. So I shouldn't have done the very same thing. I shouldn't have had a prejudice towards the idea of someone being an atheist, without understanding that I was basically doing the same thing that I hated that was being done to me. I'm just thrown into the same pile with other quote unquote Christians who I don't believe are Christians at all.
Yeah, I've often said to Jen, I think, like when we've been having a chat, more so to Jen than yourself, but that I could see that there was a lot of similarities in the way that we actually believe stuff.
Yeah,
it's just that you label it God.
Yep.
I don't have a label, but there's a lot of commonality.
Yeah, there is. There is. Yeah, I'm just willing to name it something. I think that's the major difference. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate your answer very much. Thank you, sir. All right. Let's look at the chat. Jen, did anyone answer this last question?
My computer's being weird. Do you mind if I ask you to check?
Nope, not at all. I'm already on
misbehaving.
Okay, so I'm scrolling down from the point in which you put the question in. There's Brenda. Hey, Brenda, didn't see you in there. Glad that you're here. Sarah Jane, looking. Sorry, guys. Okay, I don't see. Okay, I don't see any answers to that particular question. That's okay. And guys, if you don't answer in the chat and you start to think about this and you want to answer later, we definitely still want to hear from you. If you have any stories about this, especially this particular question about worlds colliding, we want to hear your stories. So please send it to us at truestorylive.crips@gmail.com. And we still want to hear from you. Okay. All right. So the next question is, in life's equation, where does your sphere of influence begin and end? In life's equation, where does your sphere of influence begin and end, Matthias?
I don't want, or I don't claim to know anything except Christ and Him crucified. So my sphere of influence begins and ends with the author and finisher of our faith.
Mm-hmm.
So where God leads me and guides me, and as I listen to Him, I would say that's where my sphere of influence begins and ends. When I try to put myself in the equation, I always mess things up. So
sure.
My sphere is only where God says it is.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Matthias. All right, Esteban. In life's equation, where does your sphere of influence begin and end?
I would have. I agree completely and utterly with Matthias on this. Because I mean, Christ is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. So he's the one that created everything. He's the one that's going to come back and destroy everything and recreate everything. So, I would have to say that that's the one that I follow because he's the savior. So
Yeah.
And for me personally, life, yeah, it's a journey. But the journey is when we end up finding out that it was Christ, and once we have Him and we believe on Him that He died for us and He was buried and He rose again, and we trust Him, I would have to go with that. That's when the journey really begins.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Esteban. I'm going to go next real quick because Hendricks put something in the chat that it's going to tie into my answer. And some people will get this and other people may not, but it's worth it. Hendricks says, Matthias doesn't believe in spheres. He does believe in spheres. He just doesn't believe that we live on one. So, yeah, spheres exist. It's just we don't live on one. But it's interesting that Glenn chose this particular word for this, sphere, because I have something that I've said for a long time, which is that anyone God brings into my circle, I respond in whatever way I can to whatever their issues are, if it is possible for me to do so. And that means, talking about the gospel. That means, if I have money at the time and someone needs some, I'm more than willing to help. Or if they just need someone to listen, whatever it is. So I call it circle instead of sphere. The circle, God brings someone into my circle. Now, the next question then would be, how far does my circle, the circle that I've made for myself, how far does it go out? In physical space, it goes as far as anyone that I run into. If I go into a convenience store and run into someone and there's a need of some sort, or they chat me up and in that conversation something comes up and it's something that I can address in some way, then I consider that in my circle. Certainly with my family and friends and acquaintances and people that I know, I consider them to be within my circle. So anything that would come up in those, whether it's having a conversation or whatever needs to be done, I look at things like that. It's still not putting myself in the middle of it. Yeah, and I agree with what Matthias said. If you put yourself into the equation, it messes everything up. But this is the only way I know how to look at it. Now, God can, and sometimes often does, bring someone into my circle that he wants me to involve or be involved with in some way. And that's his prerogative to do. But generally, that's the way I look at it, a circle rather than sphere. But technically, for the sake of the question, it means pretty much the same thing. But in terms of the actual shape of the earth, it's completely different. Biblically speaking, he drew a circle on the face of the earth, not a sphere, which is very different than a sphere, just so everyone knows. So some people get that and other people won't, but there it is. All right. Jen.
I was going to say our sphere of influence begins and ends with our availability.
Wow. Okay. It took me a second to process that one, Jen.
Yeah, I think depending on our availability, it can begin. You can't have any kind of influence if you're not available to talk to people and share and be open and listening being a big one. And it can end with you not being available.
That is true.
If you're not talking to people, not reaching out, not listening, it's there, it ends.
Wow. I like that. That leaves a lot of space for you, Jenn, to relate to anybody, pretty much, as long as you're available then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Jenn.
You're welcome.
All right, Glenn. You're up, sir.
Crickets.
So
Galenzo.
my turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking just to myself, where did you get so smart, Jenn?
It's you, hanging out with you all the time.
Oh no, you didn't just say that on air. You didn't.
Well, you know, honestly, when the thought dropped in my head, I was like, "This sounds like Glenn."
He's
You
smart.
must-
All right, I'm
You-
popping I'm popping it. That's okay.
Where did that was such a loaded question for somebody to pick up, and you're the only one who even went there.
Connected it to the title.
I'm taking my hat off
What hat?
to you, Jenn.
Okay,
The
not the God
Broncos.
hat. Put that back
Brisbane Broncos.
His head's already big enough. Thanks a lot, Jenn. We've been trying to eat
Yeah,
him up.
I know.
I'll get him
Okay.
later. I'll humble him later.
Okay.
No. No, you did that to Crips. Ouch. Okay.
That's not ouch. I want to be humble. So when I'm humbled, when Jenn is willing to point out to me the error of a certain way, then I'm delighted by that.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I better move on quickly.
Yeah. Move on quickly.
I think it begins and ends with yourself, because at the end of the day, you can influence yourself. But if I say to you, God does not exist, well, I've no influence on you. You have to make a decision. If you hear what I say, you can choose to accept it or say it's rubbish. So I think it just begins and ends with self. But I do agree with Jenn. If you're available, people are much more likely to listen with intent to what you have to say, because they can feel it in you. You're not false.
No.
You're coming from a place of an open heart.
Mhm.
And I think that's incredibly important when you converse with people, that you're not closed off. So, yeah. Thank you, Jenn. That was a great answer, by the way.
It was a great answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Praise God, it clicked.
Thanks, Glenn. Mike says, I don't have a sphere. It's more of a rhombus. Okay. Life's equation. That is. Any other answers that I may have missed, Jenn? Did you see any? Frank B says, yes, Crips, we can absorb our surroundings and let it consume us and take us away from Jesus and his love. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Frank.
He also said, under my comment, he said, I do not get to see mine every day, but when I do, I'm extremely thankful to Jesus. Mm-hmm. I think, if you can balance the humility and knowing that allowing God to speak through you, and being able to see that and be it's humbling. It's humbling to see that God has used you to touch somebody. And it wasn't like, oh, me, I'm the one that, spoke to someone or hit a nerve, or it's the humility that's in it. But I totally agree, Frank. It's a wonderful feeling, and it's not a puffed up feeling. It's what is the word? I don't know what the word is, but it's gratefulness and thankfulness to see that influence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Jenn.
Welcome.
All right. Next, the worlds of Miss Jenn and Mr. Jason's did indeed collide. We'll be asking them, how did you recognize you were in fact available to each other? So the question is, how did we recognize we were in fact available to the other? I'll go first, Jenn, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
So I was being encouraged along about the same time that Jenn and I originally met, or shortly thereafter. I was being encouraged by two people in my life. Glenn was one. And he alluded to that earlier. Glenn was one, and my sister was another. My sister and I are very close, and she knows that I've been praying for a long time to have a wife, and she didn't like the one that I chose the first time. She tried really hard to have a relationship with her, but my ex made that almost impossible. And I'm not going to go into all of that, but she was a difficult person to like for some, and definitely for my sister. But anyway, she knows me very well, and she knows this is a desire of my heart and has been for a long time. And I've prayed for 30, 35, 30, 40 years to be able to have God provide me with the woman that he wants for me to be with, and also to have a family. So on the tail end of my divorce and getting over that and realizing that I went ahead of God and relied on my own understanding of another person and overlooked red flags, and then I suffered the consequences of not waiting on God. And I've talked about that before. That's not news to anyone. So when Jen and I were in the place that I've already mentioned that we were still friends, I wasn't looking at that. But like I said, two people were encouraging me to be available again. And so I considered what these two people were doing, both neither one of them having knowledge the other person was doing this. And I started praying about it again. Literally, my sister gave me a stone that she found in our favorite place up in Lake Michigan in the Traverse City, Elk Rapids area, where we go every year for vacation. And they have a very special stone. It's called a Petoskey stone. It's just very different, but it can only be found in that area. So if you want to know what it looks like, you can just enter it in and look it up on the internet or Google it. It's a special looking stone. And she found one and gave it to me and said, God's been talking to me about your situation, and he told me that he wants you to start praying again for your spouse. And at the time I was like, well, first of all, thank you for thinking of me, Shannon. It meant a lot to me that she was talking to God about me, and that she would be willing to share that with me. So I thought about it for a while, and I decided that she was right, and I trust her discernment. So I started praying again after there'd been a long period of time where I was not interested. I was not available. My sign read closed, as I said earlier. So I started praying for that. So then on the Glenn side, Glenn was kind of saying the same thing. Mate, when are you going to open yourself back up to the possibility of love? And that's my paraphrase, not exactly the way he said it, but that gets it. And so I had these two forces outside of myself that were both encouraging me to do the same thing. So I just opened up to it, started praying about it. I even went on some of the dating sites and looked around to see what was available. I just hadn't done it in a long time, and literally was incredibly disappointed in what was available. I didn't like it the first time, the last time I had looked for a relationship, but just didn't see a lot there, and just kind of was what's the word I'm looking for?
Exasperated?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tough one.
Exasperated. Sorry, I said the wrong one. See, I can't even say it now.
We know what you mean.
Oh my goodness. I talk
We'll practice later, Crips.
That's right. Exasperated.
There you go. Yep, there you go.
Whew, got it out. Okay. After looking at what was available, and especially after being awake and being in this place in my life where I'm looking at the world in a completely different way that I didn't see before, and the kind of woman that I was looking for, it just didn't seem like it was even possible for me to find her. I just didn't know how it was going to happen. But the question's not asking, did I think I would find it? The question is saying, when did I realize I was open or available? And it was along this period of time after I had been being encouraged by Glenn and my sister, both at the same time, to be available again. So how it relates specifically to Jenn, I was available either way. I couldn't control the circumstances Jenn was in, and I wasn't looking at her as an option, but I was available. So that ties into what both Jenn and Glenn were saying about the availability makes the difference as to everything else. So I was available at that point. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is there more?
Nope.
Okay.
That was long enough.
All right. And for me, when did I recognize that I was actually available was only by the hand of God. Honestly, after my marriage ended, and a lot of people don't know my story, and I don't want to get into too much detail, although there's a lot. I'll just say that it was just very, very abusive. And just even coming out of the marriage and realizing how incredibly abusive it was, for any chance for me to move on and even look for anybody else, even actually before that, even leaving, it was only by the hand of God. And I couldn't have it any other way. I had already, like Cripps, sort of similar, had made the mistake of not, ignoring red flags, not waiting on God when it came to waiting for the person that he had for me. And just making a really big mistake and reaping the repercussions of that, the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So, gosh, it's, I can't pinpoint an actual time. It was not a million. That's not literal. That's figuratively. It was 100 different promptings of the Lord. And I hate to use the word signs because some people bristle at that.
Yeah.
But I think God knew that because of the situation I was coming out of, and being very wounded, having a lot of wounds and a lot of hurts, he knew that I would need many confirmations to be like, okay, it's okay. Like, this is of me, and it's not you. It's not your flesh. It's not a rebound. It's not running away from the healing that I need you to walk out. To get closer to me and to just heal. So I don't know if that's a really good answer. It would just take me so long to get into the details of it. And I've journaled the whole time.
Yeah.
But they're just, I just really, really had to see the hand of God in it, because I had already done the process of not waiting on God and not waiting to see his leading and where that led me for 13 years. It was very, very destructive. Now, at the same time, it's taught me so much. I've learned so much. I know there's a lot of people that get out of a marriage, and whether it's abusive or not, it's hard not to look back and regret and think that, oh my gosh, all this time was wasted. No, it hasn't been at all. God has shown me in many, many details how he has shaped me and taught me and drawn me close to him throughout the whole 13 years. And I can look back at how hard it was and how painful it was, how toxic it was, and see his hand and see the ways that he moved despite all that. Which is amazing to me. It blows my mind every time I think about it, to think that, I know that he works through hard stuff, but to see how much he works in it is pretty amazing. So
Wow.
That's my answer.
Wow. Very well said. Thank you, Jenn. I appreciate that very much. Okay. So I'm going to open it up to the panel. I know this particular question doesn't apply particularly to you, but Glenn put in here, sounds like a good time also for others to contribute their stories. So that goes to everyone on the panel and the chat. So if you have any stories to share, we would definitely like to hear them. And if you don't want to share them tonight in the chat, definitely send us the email. But anyone on the panel want to tell us your story of how you were both available and unavailable, if any of that applies? And if you don't, we'll just move on to the next question.
I'll just say that Frank did ask in chat or give permission to read his story if anyone wants to take up that. Jenn or Jason, take up that option. It was quite interesting to me, that's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Jenn, would you like to read it, or would you like me?
Let me scroll up. My scrolling window's not very big. How far up is it?
It's right above. Mike has commented, since his name is all in caps, so Frank starts right above Mike and after
Anna's smiley faces.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Frank shared. He said, I went up to order, and it was her. I didn't know it at the time, but I could feel something, so I smiled and gave small talk. Went back in a few more times, asked for her number, and she smiled and gave it to me. I never called because I thought it was the wrong number. So time went by, and I go back in and we talk about it. We laugh, and I give her my number. A few days go by. I go back in, and I noticed... Oh, wait, no. Is that BB Truth? I'm reading the wrong one. Okay.
Yeah, go down.
Go back in and ask why she never called. She said I didn't ask if she called guys, which she didn't. We laughed again. Over time, we finally talked, and she took me home. It was all God's will. Now, and forgive me, honey, if you are watching this, and if I share too much. And I think he's talking to his wife in case she reads. Thank you, Frank, for sharing.
Yeah, share two amazing, beautiful girls.
Oh, I forgot the end.
That's
I didn't read the end.
We share two amazing, beautiful girls and share Jesus now in our lives, even though we are two worlds apart. The end. Perfect. Okay, great. Thanks, Jenn. Thank you, Frank. Any other ones? I'm just scrolling through real quick.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Why do worlds collide and then now they're worlds apart?
Well, that is a question that Jenn and I have talked about many times, and it's actually a little bit of not an obsession, but it is something that I'm continuously trying to answer. So, from my perspective, when you hear people talk about divorce and you hear them talk about the beginning of their relationship, I've never talked to one single person that says, yeah, I hated my wife when we got married. I just did it for A, B, C, and D. Nobody says that. Everyone has a similar story. Oh, yeah, we were so in love, and it's a wonderful story of how they met and all that stuff. And then, so how then do you go from that to the end of the story, which is it ends in divorce and in some cases them hating each other? How does that happen? Now, I can't speak for anyone else, but in my personal story, I know how it happened. It happened, A, because I didn't wait on God. I ran ahead of him and avoided the red flags that I saw at the time. But the red flags basically contributed to us not being equally yoked and to us not being connected, not having God first in our marriage, and not being in agreement on that being the way that the marriage was going to go from the beginning. I mean, we agreed on paper. You know, we both believers, supposedly, and both on the same page about, going to church occasionally and doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do. But truthfully, we weren't connected. We didn't put God first in the relationship. And when the storms of life came, the foundation of our marriage was built on sand, and it went flat. That's my particular answer to that question. I can't answer for anyone else, but I think that it's true. If that's true for me, it would in many cases be true for other marriages, that they're either unequally yoked, they don't put God first in the scenario, or for people that don't believe in God, it's that they're not truly connected to the person. That the connection is based on either just fleshly love, or I'm trying to think of the right word. It's based on things that don't last, based on temporal things, things that fade over time. They base it on the chemicals they feel when they first fall in love, and the minute those chemicals die down and they have to face real life, getting jobs, stress, cars breaking down, children, whatever, there's no base. There's no firm foundation on which the relationship is based on. So without a firm foundation, then these things come in, and you can take someone that loved each other, at least thought they did at the beginning, and then they're the two worlds colliding. Again, it goes back to what Matthias says, that each person has free will. So if one person wants to be connected, they want to be equally yoked, but the other person's unwilling, it can't happen. So really, one person not being in that place can mess it up for both of them. You both have to be willing. Being willing is extremely important. Both being on the same page and being connected. And this is just my opinion, but if you have if both people in the relationship are on the same page, they are agree on what they believe, and they have God in the center, then the marriage won't fail. I really believe that, and I could be wrong, but I don't know how anyone could prove me wrong. But yeah, that's what I believe. Anyone else want to take a crack at Glenn's question?
Can I?
Yep,
Oh.
you go. Oh, you
Oh.
go.
No, go ahead, Glenn. Go ahead.
Okay. Here's one that involves unequally yoked. This is myself and JC's mum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think it's a poignant story, and it's not a story about lack of love,
Right.
or falling out of love. It's not that at all, because that was constant, always.
Yeah.
But it's about one person saying to another who's asked them to marry him, I will marry you if you become a Christian.
Okay.
Now, that is a big ask.
Sure it is.
And it was too big an ask for me, to keep it simple.
Yeah.
I looked at it and I said, I cannot, in all conscience, compromise myself and be a hypocrite, because it's not fair. It's not fair to me.
Sure.
And it's not fair to you. And that is a case where it's not about drifting apart because of lack of love. It's a case of just it was too much for the other for Linda to accept that she was not going to be, or too much to accept that she would be in a relationship with someone who didn't believe in God. Now, I could have very easily spat the dummy and got very pissed on God, but it didn't happen that way, because that would not be fair.
Right.
And it's not God's fault. It's that people have to make choices.
Yeah.
She made the choice as to what was important to her.
Yeah.
But I think underneath it pretty much killed the both of us inside.
Sure.
And it took a long time to work through that. So,
yeah. And frankly, in my opinion, my mother was wrong to even ask that question to begin with. And it's just my opinion. You can't make someone choose God if they're not in a place of belief. They can't just say, oh, you know what? I love you so much. You know what? I'll just go ahead and accept. I'll go ahead and accept God. I'll go ahead and believe in him. That's impossible. So even if you've been willing, Glenn, to do that, it wouldn't have worked.
I agree with you, because there's a part of you that you compromise your integrity, and you will live with that decision every second of every day.
Yeah.
And you can't do it. You can't do it.
That's right.
I would have never forgiven myself if I'd been untrue to the person I cared so much about. It's not right.
Absolutely. But the beauty of it is, Glenn, even though that particular relationship didn't work out the way either of us would have hoped it would, and for me, it's only in retrospect and looking back at it. In some ways, I'd have much preferred that you guys would have found a way to work it out rather than her going back to my dad and putting herself back in the same situation that she left to begin with, where the person wasn't equally yoked. They weren't on the same page. They were not connected. They're connected in certain ways, yes, but connected in the ways that matter. Yeah. So she went back, put herself back in the same situation again, and got the same result. She couldn't handle it. Very quickly realized that she'd made a mistake, and took her a long time to get back out of it again. And then she had to live with the consequences of that decision for the rest of her life. But yeah, definitely the bottom line of that is you can't force someone to just accept something they don't believe in. Doesn't work.
And if they're not available under the circumstances, well, they're not available. It's as simple as that.
Well, yeah. From your point of view, she wasn't available because she's putting conditions on her love for you, at least as far as marriage is concerned. I think she still loved you anyway, even though you didn't end up married. She's putting conditions on it that are impossible to impose on someone else.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say with availability.
Yeah.
It's so bound up in love, but it's not simple. You just can't make a blanket statement that everyone's circumstances are the same. Now, we look at Frank's situation and we see where people drift apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's way different from people who still really have genuine and authentic feelings for each other. It's just so different in every case.
Yep. Yeah, we're unique. We're unique people, and we have unique relationships.
Yep. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you filling that in. So does anyone else want to try to answer Glenn's secondary question? Yep, go ahead, Esteban.
Well, I can give an example too, kind of like that. It's kind of similar.
Perfect.
Well, my ex that I had my triplets with, she was a non-believer. She didn't like that I started going into the Bible more. As soon as we had the girls, it was kind of like I was going back and forth on it, but I can tell that it was all Jesus in a way, but then I wasn't fully persuaded. But she wasn't. She didn't like that I was even going into the Bible.
Right.
You see, and I started talking to the girls about Christ, about things like that, and she didn't like that. And what it did was it made it worse between me and her, and we both still tried to work things out because of the girls. And every time when we tried, it seemed like I had one point of view that was different from her point of view, and she didn't like that. So it just made more strife and more anger towards her, and she started getting very upset with me. So we both ended up splitting, and it sucks because we had the girls and all that at the time. But when you think about it, God works in mysterious ways on these things, on these matters, because in a way it benefited not just her, but it also benefited the girls, and it benefited us, because if the girls kept seeing us arguing about, hey, what about this point of view or that point of view, they're just going to get confused. And it was like God was telling me, and well, she didn't believe in it, but God was telling her basically in a way, in her unbelief, that this wasn't going to work.
Right.
So so the more I started looking at it later on, that's when I met my fiance. Years, it was 2-3 years down the road.
Okay.
And everything just started working out. She's a believer. And we come together, and we even talk to the girls about Christ. So it's awesome. We work together as a team. like it's supposed to be.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I'm glad to hear that, Esteban. Thanks for
That's
sharing. Anyone else on this one? And if not, we'll move on. Okay. All right. So the next question is, what part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes? What part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes? That's a good question. Matthias, we've been talking a lot and haven't heard from you, so tackle that one if you'd like to.
Okay, I'm looking for it. Say it one more time.
Yeah, sure. What part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes?
I would say a lot, but they shouldn't.
Right.
You know, a lot of people are scared to take risks, but when you're leaning on the Lord and stepping out on not just blind faith, but solid faith.
Thank you.
There really isn't much taking risk.
Yes.
And the fear is just not trusting the Lord, but leaning on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a relationship wise, being available, I mean, that was stepping out of your shell and taking a risk of rejection would be able to, you know, be one way that you can help worlds collide.
Yeah.
But if you're fearful of it, then that'll cause problems.
Yeah.
But for the biblical standpoint, no, there shouldn't be fear, and we haven't been given the spirit of fear.
Yes.
And it really is the boldness that comes from the Holy Spirit to be able to go through and show your availability to the world.
Amen. Fantastic. Thanks, Matthias. I'm kind of chomping at the bit of this question, but we'll go to Esteban. Esteban, what part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes?
With fear, I mean that's the work of the flesh. That's like Matthias said. It's you're starting to lean on your own understanding instead of leaning on God's understanding. It tells us in Joshua 1:9 to not be afraid. You know, he says to be of great courage. When we're leaning more on Him, it goes all to the wayside. All the stuff that the flesh has, it starts to go to the wayside. So I would have to say just lean on Christ. I mean, He's the author and finisher of our faith.
Yeah. And
we shouldn't have to worry about this world because we have eternity to be with Him.
Amen. Wow, good answer. Thanks, Esteban. Jen, do you want to take it?
I'm still thinking.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Okay.
I wanted to be nice and offer everyone else.
Oh, thank you.
First. Okay, I love this question, Glenn. Thank you so much. So, on the part of risk, what part does risk play? Risk plays everything on the part of the person that's in the situation. For me, there was a lot of risk in stepping into a relationship with Jenn. Just coming out of a marriage and not knowing what kind of damage was done by the abuse, and not knowing if you know, she stated very clearly it wasn't a rebound. She stated several things earlier about what it wasn't. But at that time, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure the level of damage. I wasn't sure. There were a lot of unknowns. There were a lot of questions involved. So for me, there was a lot of risk. And Matthias mentioned rejection. There was even a risk of that. And not that, you know, I thought that Jenn, if we were ever in a relationship, would automatically do that. But for me, abandonment and rejection and those two things have been a fear of mine, based pretty much going back to my childhood, and I avoided them like the plague. I wasn't a big dater back in the day when I had the opportunity to do so, because I just couldn't put myself into a situation to be rejected or abandoned. And although I shouldn't have had fear, Matthias states very, very correctly that we're not given the spirit of fear. But I did have fear about it. I did. And in my opinion, looking back, it did prevent me from pursuing relationships that otherwise would have been more helpful to me. I may have learned the lesson that I needed to learn in my marriage earlier on if I had been more willing, if I'd set aside my fear and decided to take a risk. But again, it goes back to the way things happened is the way things happened. But for me, a lot of risk. Now, when it comes to this particular relationship with Jenn, I had no fear. No fear. And that is because of where I am in my relationship with God. And it also is that the answer to availability had already been answered before Jenn was ever available. So I believe in my concept and how I see God. I see God as systematically working in me to set things up step by step for me to be ready if that were ever to be possible. If Jenn were to ever become available, then I'll be ready. But I didn't know that she would be willing to start to get to know me in a different way before the divorce was complete on paper. That we would continue to be friends and wait for the right time to step into something more serious, et cetera, et cetera. So all those questions were answered, similar to what she answered earlier about all the similarities and all the things that God showed us both as individuals leading up to this point. Just putting things in line and removing, for me at least, I just didn't have a fear about it. There's still a risk. It's still a risk. But for me, in the area of availability, the fear wasn't a factor for me. That's my answer to that. Jenn?
Gosh, I'm guessing risk was a part of it, but the fear for me was specifically with the situation with Cripps.
Mm-hmm.
You.
Okay.
So we're to talk about you in the third person.
Yeah.
For me was that this new relationship, or not relationship, but feelings, was not of God.
Right.
I didn't want anything not of God. I was like, no, I don't want that. I've had that. I've already made mistakes way back and getting out of the repercussions of that. And God is amazing. He's amazing how much he knows us. And he knew that. He knew I was dealing with that, and showed me in many ways that it was of him. And through that, the fear was extinguished.
Beautiful.
So.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Jenn.
Didn't touch on the risk, but the fear, yes.
Oh, do you want to touch on the risk?
Risk. Gosh, risk.
Was there risk for you?
Risk. I'd have to think on that more.
Okay. Glenn, do you have a comment you'd like to make about this particular question? What part do risk and fear play in the availability stakes, my friend?
For me, it was never about risk. The fear back yonks ago was about, am I going to stuff this up again?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And to the point, well, basically, am I in a basically the question you ask yourself: am I in the right place here to be going out into the world and actually attracting the kind of person that I want to attract? So there was an element of fear, but I think very quickly I got over that and basically couldn't have cared less. I just said, I'm doing it. I'm doing it, and hang the consequences. Just go out there, and what comes, and just let it all go. And it worked. Simple. Gave up that garbage and moved on. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. All right. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate that. All right. We'll move on to the next question. I believe I did ask everyone. Jen, did you want to answer the risk part, or you just want to go ahead and move forward?
We can go and move forward. Yeah, I'm not pulling anything up yet.
No, no problem. What part do your previous experiences play in your relationships? Relationship availability. I'll read that again. I messed the whole thing up. What part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision? What part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision? Matthias, you get the first dibs.
All right, I know you said it twice. What is my previous? Because my answer is simple, I think.
Okay.
I need to hear it one more time.
Yeah, no problem. What part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision? Your decision to be available.
Okay. My wedding.
Oh, your wedding. That's your simple answer. Your previous experience was
Right.
okay.
Well, I mean, I am not available in relationship. And my previous experience that established that in the Word of God, because that's where it's written.
Yeah.
Was my marriage. So
okay.
No, I just had to listen to it one more time to make sure that my marriage fit that perfectly, and it did.
It did. Okay. Thank you. Esteban, what part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision?
Gosh, I really got to think about this because I don't know how to say this because I mean I'm not married, so I mean I have a fiance, so it's like I'm not available to do to how do I say that like but like I don't know how to say this. I'm like thinking about it right now. Can you come back to me?
Yeah, I'll go.
Okay, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, in the context, this popped in my head with God. My previous experiences with God, moving in my life and moving in other people's lives around me, and what He has done in those experiences makes me want to be more and more available.
Wow.
But do you know what I mean? Like it's amazing to look back and see when you step out in faith, not blind faith, but but it's exciting. It's exciting to be in a place of availability and see what God does.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like I spoke to you a while back about, gosh, walking on this path with God and wanting to run ahead in front of Him out of fear of not knowing what's going to happen or what's going on. But then the clinging to Him, there's an excitement to that because there's so much that He can do and there's so much that He does do and has done.
Yeah.
And it's such an amazing experience that it just makes you want to be more available for Him to work through you. And then my past experience relationship-wise made me get more specific with who I'm available to.
Awesome.
So that's my answer. Yeah.
I like that part.
Yeah.
I like that you know that. That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenn. For me, what part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision? It's everything. Everything. The beauty of, this is how merciful God is, that even though there were consequences of my original decision to marry essentially, not essentially, but truly the wrong person, and to ignore red flags, and to make that decision based on my own understanding and not on his understanding. He very much didn't have any, he could have not had it be a learning experience. He could have not redeemed the time for me. But he did. He ended up being that it wasn't a waste at all, that everything that I learned from that experience, that previous experience in relationship, prepared me to be the person that I am today, honestly. Even the pain of it, even the time that I spent recovering from the consequences of my own decision, every little part of it, and everything leading up to that, every experience that I ever experienced, even in my trying to avoid being rejected or abandoned, all added up to a greater sense of courage, my relationship with God, and I'm going to tie it in too to what Jenn said, because very much everything that God has done in my life and showed me, not based on some blind faith, but based on evidence that's been presented to me out of His goodness, that He's real. It has happened over and over and over again, that this person that I believe in, this God of creation, just over and over, He's shown me through everything that I deal with in my life that He's real. I can't impress this on people enough, that when people say, "Oh, I believe in God in blind faith," no, you don't. No, you don't. There's evidence. There's the evidence that we have from Scripture. There's the evidence of other believers and sharing their testimony and hearing what God's done in their life. And then there's the attention that He pays to each person that He walks with and shows them that He's real. And so leading up to this very special relationship that I have now with Jenn, very much every experience in my life has led me to this point, and prepared me to be here, and to not have it be where I'm overlooking red flags, to not have it be where I'm running ahead of God. I literally took my hands off the controls. Simply being available, I was simply available, made the decision to be available before any of this ever happened. And having made that decision, then I didn't force anything. I didn't create anything. I didn't try to make anything happen. And the beauty of having Jenn on the panel is she can corroborate what I just said in saying that I didn't do any of that. It simply was being presented to me, and we went through it step by step, and cautiously wanting to know that it wasn't some infatuation, it wasn't rebound, it wasn't any of those things, that it was something that God had done. And He made it so clear that there was no mistaking it for anything else other than a work of God.
Yeah. Praise God.
Praise God indeed. He gets all the glory. I get none. I literally get none. It's not because I'm a great person. It's not all the knowledge and things that He's taught me over the years. It literally is because of who He is and not because of who I am at all. So there's that. All right. Esteban, we gave you a break to think about it, I think. Are you ready to answer, or do you want me to go to Glenn?
So okay. I'm still like, okay. I hear what you guys are saying too, and it's made me think about it a lot too. What? Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. What part does God play in your relationship availability decision?
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that I can't do nothing without him.
Right.
It's like thinking about Lazarus and the rich man. You're I just want to be his child.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to do without him. Like I'm serious. Like I to be quite honest with you, before I even knew him, I was deeply depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I don't really like talking about it, but I used to cut myself a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into writing dark music. I mean, really dark music. To be quite honest with you, without him, I wouldn't know light. I wouldn't know what was right. He, through the scriptures, he showed me what was really, truly right and what was truly wrong. Because, like I said, he's the one that gives us the choice in life to either believe him or not to. And if you know, I don't know what else to really say. I mean, that's just something that comes to mind. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Esteban. And same question for Matthias. Oh, sorry. Glenn, did you have anything you want to say about the... I read Esteban the wrong question, but that's okay. So he's the first one to answer that one. So, Glenn, what part do your previous experiences play in your relationship availability decision?
Hang on, the cat just... Oh, mate.
You and that cat, man. Come on. Again with the cat.
He jumped on me.
Tonight. Well, if you didn't have him in the room, then while you're in a broadcast, it wouldn't be a problem. And we wouldn't get nothing now.
He's getting hungry, but I don't. He just landed on my head.
Oh, my gosh.
He said, yeah. Okay. I've told him not to do it, and he's not listening. Okay. Well, you won't have to come to me for the third part. What part does God play? Because that's obviously
okay. No problem.
Out of my league. But the previous one, it's almost paradoxical, for me that the negative experiences have actually led me to want to be more available. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds crazy because usually positive experiences say, "Oh, let's get more of that," but I think it's the negatives that sort of highlighted the gap between what was and what might be if you were to be available. So basically, you go out and be available, see what comes back.
Okay.
Same answer. And I noticed, I knew this was going to come up, and just so you're aware of it, in the chat, Frank's bringing up the scriptural.
Yeah, he knows. He answered.
Yep.
Oh, did he? Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yep.
I didn't see that because I was answering this. Okay, I'm good. Thanks.
No problem.
That's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so the last question for the evening is the one I read to Esteban. What part does God play in your relationship availability decision? Matthias? This might be a short answer for you, but that's okay.
Right. Because of what God says about marriage?
No. I just, the last one is short. You said, yeah. And you could easily just say, well, God told me to marry her.
Right. Well, that was my answer, actually.
Okay.
because of what
I'm really starting to get to know you better, Matthias, because of all these questions.
Well, I mean, there's when it boils down to it, that's the crux of it. Mm-hmm. How does he play? Well, because he says to love our wives the way that Christ loves the church, and to die for them. So,
absolutely.
So I mean, what part does God play? I guess, the most vital part.
Yes.
But I would say that I'm grateful for what he says as well.
Amen.
So while it's a great thing to lean and have as your rock, the words that he says, it's also awesome that exactly just what he says. I mean, he who findeth a wife findeth a good thing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Praise God for that.
Praise God for that. Amen. Thank you, Matthias. Appreciate that. Esteban already answered. So, Jen, if you're ready, you can go, or I'll go.
Go, please.
What part does God play in your relationship availability decision? Every single part. I told the story of how two people, without knowing the other one was doing it, one being Glenn and the other being my sister, were one of them from a very spiritual perspective and one from a non-spiritual. Well, I can't say it wasn't spiritual at all, but it was just basically from a place of not necessarily using God as the reason for the spiritual part, but both people encouraging me to move forward and to put the open sign up that still is my icon for this particular show. The open sign that everybody sees every time I say anything, which is a lot on the show. So that being open was, I took the encouragement from two other people and prayed about it. I took it to God and brought it to him, and knowing that I was forgiven long before I was ever born for the decisions that I made, where I very clearly and openly went against him, and I definitely sinned against him, and rather than other than just allowing me to go through the consequences of my own decision, he didn't turn his back on me. He loved me. He gave me grace, and also allowed my all the time that I spent to be redeemed. He just is just so amazing. I cannot tell you how much my relationship with God plays into every decision that I make. That hasn't always been the case. There were parts and times in my life when I relied on my own strength and my own power, and didn't ever really. I mean, I knew God was there. I spoke with him often, and we did have a relationship. But I did not put him in the proper place where he deserves and belongs in, regardless of whether I put him there or not. He is sovereign. He is everything. And my relying on my own strength and my own ability got me so far in certain areas, but there came a point in my life when I got into that marriage and was holding marriage itself up as an idol. And I went through calamity because of it. But out of that, I was humbled. And I had true humility, which didn't come from myself. It came as a gift from God. And then so from that point in my life, I switched my thinking from where it had been to where it needed to be. And as a result of that, I looked to him for my decisions, especially in a relationship. There was no way that I was going to get into another relationship after what happened the first time and have any doubt. I had no doubt that it was God that was doing it, and it wasn't Satan, it wasn't me, it was God. And so he had everything to do with my availability decision. Absolutely everything. That's my answer. Jen?
Yeah, mine's going to be fairly similar to yours. Go figure. Yeah. God's part, God, he didn't really play any part in my decision in my first marriage. And part of it was immaturity. Back then, I had no idea. I thought I did. I was convinced I knew what waiting on God was. And I was convinced, convinced myself that I knew how to hear him, and I didn't. I just wasn't very far along with my walk with him, my relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, this relationship currently, I had to, I went through so much, and I don't know if I'll ever get the chance to share with you guys some of it, but I know it may speak to some people, and part of me wants people to understand, but really and truly that's between God and I when it comes down to it. But I, again, just like Cripps said, I didn't want to make a move or choose another person without him being solely in control of it, and just being, I don't even know how to say it.
You're fine.
Sorry, it's
that's okay.
it's hard not to get emotional. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
No, but just wanting his best for me, and sometimes his best isn't rainbows and sunshine, but just wanting to follow him, wanting to follow his will, wanting his will to be walked out in my life. And the crazy thing is, like, even in my mistake before and not waiting on him and looking back and seeing that I didn't hear from him and I did run ahead, and there's a part of me that thinks I deserved what I got. But the grace of God, as I look back at it, I see how he used it.
Wow.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how he used it. And it was incredibly painful and scary. And, but just the love that he shows us, even in the times where we make the mistakes and we step out of his will and make free will decisions to do something that's out of his will, he still uses it.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me. But no, with the question, I couldn't. It's not just I couldn't. A big part of it was I couldn't, but I didn't want to either. Move ahead in any kind of relationship after what I came out of without him being the leader, being the one that was guiding me into something. I just couldn't. I couldn't make the decision myself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great answer. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for being willing to share.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So let me just make sure that there aren't any other questions. And Glenn already removed himself from this particular question, which I completely understand. I think that does it, guys. Yeah. Okay, great. As we're closing up, I just want to say, with this whole topic of availability, which a lot of the questions were relating to, the biggest thing is that God is available to you, regardless of your situation, whether you're looking at him as something that you're available for or not. If you do feel like he's available to you and you're in a relationship with him, all you need to do is just continue to abide in him and continue to be connected to him and remain in him, and he keeps you. So that should be fairly simple. If you're not available to him for whatever reason, just know that he's available to you right now, that you have the option to seek him, and to he's calling. If you're hearing my voice now, he's calling you. I mean, he wants to have a relationship with you. He's opened that up to all people. We all have free will. We all have the ability to be open or closed when it comes to God, and also to be open or closed when it comes to relationships. And the relationship with God is no different, except that he's not a person. He's not fallible. He's unchanging, and he will never fail you. So I invite you to put your open sign to open instead of closed when it comes to God. And it can change everything with your availability towards other people. Yeah, so that's what I want to say about that. I want to thank all the members of the panel, as usual, for being willing to do these broadcasts with me. And I also want to thank everyone in the chat who's been a part of this conversation. Thank you for always being here and listening. And if you're listening to playback, thanks for coming. If you haven't subscribed, definitely, if you felt anything edifying or interesting from the broadcast, please subscribe and click the bell so you can get notifications of when True Story Live is on. Just a couple of things. We had a wonderful testimony on TSL with Matthias's wife Paula, and we actually have another one lined up. I will be posting the schedule. It's not set in stone, but this broadcast will be with the gentleman that was on with us on Monday's Milk this past week. Joseph is his name, and he wants to give his testimony, and we can't wait to have it. And this will also be simulcast on Talking Doctrine when it's all set up, so you'll have 2 ways to listen to the show. All right, so we'll start with Glenn. Glenn, say goodnight to everyone.
Good night, everyone. And on a personal note, I'll say I'm just absolutely delighted that you two are together, and look forward to telling you in person when you come to Australia.
Yes. We will.
When that will be, I do not know.
We don't know yet, but I think it's important to both of us. Jen?
I hate flying.
You hate flying. Well, we can't get there by train, bus, or car, or motorbike, or bicycle.
We could take the bridge, right? There's a bridge.
There's a bridge?
I'm just joking.
Yeah, well, that would be a long bridge, wouldn't it? Oh, my God.
I think it fell down.
It fell down, yeah.
Going around the curve and being upside down and all.
I know, right?
That's right.
I thought Australia didn't exist and it was just a bunch of actors.
Yeah, someone actually did say that one, too.
I was like, what?
Yeah,
You'll get paid out on.
Yeah, Glenn, you're a great actor for claiming to be in a country that doesn't exist.
And the Earth's flat too, mate.
I know. Tell me something I already know.
That was a joke.
I know it was a joke on your part, but it didn't work because you're stating the obvious.
Truth and plain jokes.
Flat bowling ball, yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Esteban. Say goodnight to the folks, Esteban.
Thank you for having me on again. Good night, everybody. Have a good night and God bless.
Perfect. Matthias?
It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. The questions
Thank you.
are good. I liked them tonight. They were more pertaining towards the happy announcement of last week, but always good. And thank you, Forum. Thank you, chat, and everyone listening in replay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Matthias. Join us on Talking Doctrine tomorrow night for another episode of Monday's Milk. I'll be on that. If you want to hear me and anything else, then come over to Sin City Preacher on Wednesday for our weekly Bible study. And I do believe, I'm not sure what Steve's plan is for Saturday. I'm assuming that he's going to do a show. I don't know if I'll be a part of that or not, but we'll see how everything goes. And so stay tuned for that. And then we'll be back here again next Sunday for another episode of True Story Live. Now, what we do, this is already kind of scheduled. What we're going to have next Sunday, it's going to be about Glenn. We're going to be able to ask Glenn some questions from the panel. And he's putting himself kind of in the hot seat this time. Instead of him doing the write-up and asking all the questions, we're going to be asking him some questions. And some of it, we've had some people request more information about some of his travels and things like that. So it'll have a dual purpose. We'll be able to hear about some of the places Glenn has been, and he'll get a chance to talk about even Australia a little bit. And we'll also be able to ask him questions, and he's fully available and ready and willing and open and authentic. And so you have that to look forward to, and getting a chance to know Glenn a little better, and us coming up with the questions. So that means for the members of the panel, if you have any questions that you've been longing to ask Glenn, please get them together. You don't necessarily have to send them to me, just get them ready. And if you're in the chat and you have any questions for Glenn, we will open it up just like we always do for you to ask Glenn questions live. Okay? So that's planned for next Sunday. All right. And gosh, thank you guys again for being here on the panel. And thank you, chat. That's it for now. Until next week, God bless, good night, and take care. Thanks so much.